The boardroom was packed, every seat filled with executives in tailored suits, all facing the massive screen at the front. Choi Min-sok stood beside his presentation, finishing the final slide of his $40 million preliminary architectural concept. With this design, he said, we position ourselves as the clear favorite for the much-coveted mega contract. Applause broke out immediately. Loud, automatic, the kind of applause that came from people too afraid to disagree with the man writing their paychecks. Naomi Reed sat near the back of the room, arms crossed, watching the applause with quiet skepticism. She'd been invited as a courtesy. Her small firm was one of dozens submitting proposals to qualify in working along a bigger firm for the same contract, and she'd spent the last 20 minutes studying the blueprints projected on the screen with growing unease. The applause died down with her raised hand. "Excuse me, sir," Naomi said, her voice cutting cleanly through the settling silence. "There are big flaws in this setup." Every head in the room turned toward her. Min-sok's eyebrows rose slightly, more curious than offended. "Bold claim." "Yes," Naomi said, standing. "3 things." The room went tense instantly. Executives shot her disbelieving glances, some outright hostile, clearly wondering what gave an outsider from a small firm the audacity to challenge Choi Min-sok in front of his entire team. One executive near the front started to rise. "You must be out of your mind. Can you just—" Min-sok raised a single hand, silencing him instantly. "Let her finish." Naomi walked to the front of the room without waiting for further permission, pulling up the structural blueprints on the main screen. "First," she said, pointing to a section of the eastern wing, "your load-bearing calculations don't account for Seoul's updated seismic codes. This design would pass inspection, technically, but it's cutting margins dangerously close for a building this height." Murmurs filled the room. "Second," she swiped to the next section, "your water reclamation system contradicts your own environmental branding. You're marketing this as a sustainable luxury development, but the current design would actually increase water waste by nearly 12% compared to your competitors' recent projects." Min-sok's expression shifted slightly, his arms uncrossing. "Third," Naomi continued, "this cultural element here," she pointed to an ornamental facade feature meant to reflect traditional Korean architecture, misrepresents the actual historical principle it's drawing from. If this goes public, architectural critics will notice immediately. It could damage your credibility with exactly the audience you're trying to impress. She stepped back from the screen. "That's all. 3 things." The room stayed completely silent. Min-sok studied the screen for a long moment, running the numbers in his head, cross-referencing what she'd said against his own knowledge of the project. Slowly, the reality settled over him. She was right. About all 3, and if this presentation had gone forward exactly as planned, into the final bid submission for the highly competitive $80 billion contract, those flaws could have cost him the chance of landing the mega contract, or worse, cost him millions in corrections after construction had already begun. "You just saved us a significant amount of money," Min-sok said quietly, more to himself than to the room. Naomi shrugged. "I just did my job." After the meeting ended and executives filed out, whispering among themselves, Min-sok approached Naomi directly, ignoring the stunned looks from his own team. "Where do you work?" "A small firm. You wouldn't know it." "Try me." "Reed and Associates. 4 people, including me." Something flickered across Min-sok's face. Interest, maybe respect. Wondering how someone from a small firm have this kind of knowledge and observation that beat his own team. "I want you on this project." 3 days later, a formal contract arrived at Naomi's small office, delivered by one of Min-sok's assistants. Naomi read through it carefully, line by line, the way she read every contract, slowly, thoroughly, trusting nothing at face value. Her name would be attached to the project publicly, prominent credit, significant compensation, but as she continued reading, her stomach tightened. All final creative decisions would remain with Min-sok's internal design team. Her role was listed as consulting contributor, a title that sounded impressive, but meant In practice, that she'd have no real authority over the work bearing her name. She'd be a figurehead, a diversity credit for the press release. Nothing more. Naomi set the contract down and picked up her phone. She met Min-sok in his office that afternoon, the contract sitting between them on his desk. "I appreciate the offer," Naomi said, "but I won't lend my name to work I have no real authority over." Min-sok leaned back slightly, studying her. "You're turning down a potential millions of dollars over creative control." "I'm turning down a potential millions of dollars that's not appreciating my value," Naomi said evenly. "There's a difference." Silence stretched between them for a moment. Min-sok had spent years surrounded by people who said yes to everything, who took whatever terms he offered without question. This woman had walked into his boardroom, exposed 3 costly flaws in front of his entire executive team, and was now walking away from a life-changing contract because the fine print didn't meet her standards. He found himself, unexpectedly, more intrigued than frustrated. "Understood," he said finally. "Thank you for your honesty." Naomi nodded once and left his office without another word. 3 days passed in silence. Naomi assumed the offer was gone entirely, filed away as another missed opportunity. Another reminder that being right didn't always mean being valued. Then, on the 4th day, a new contract arrived. This one was different. Full creative authority, co-lead credit on the entire project, her name listed directly alongside Min-sok's. Decision-making power equal to his own internal design team, with contractual language ensuring no changes could be made to her structural or aesthetic contributions without her explicit approval. Naomi read through every line twice, searching for a catch, a loophole, some hidden clause that would undermine everything on the surface. There wasn't one. She called Min-sok directly, his private number listed at the bottom of the contract. "Why restructure the entire deal?" she asked. "For someone you just met days ago?" "Because you were right about the flaws in my design," Min-sok said. "And you were right to refuse a contract that used your name without giving you real power. I don't want a figurehead, Miss Reed. I want the person who caught what an entire room of executives missed." Naomi was quiet for a moment, genuinely caught off guard by the directness of his answer. "All right," she finally said, "I accept." Across the city, in a quieter, less glamorous office on a lower floor, Director Oh Kwang-soo read the internal memo announcing Naomi Reed's full partnership on the mission to get the $80 billion project. His jaw tightened as he read her name listed alongside Min-sok's co-lead credit, full creative authority. For months, Kwang-soo had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes, calling in favors, positioning his nephew, who's inexperienced, underqualified, but family, to eventually take lead architect credit on this exact project. An outsider had just walked in and taken everything he'd carefully arranged, and to be a woman from some tiny 4-person firm nobody had ever heard of annoyed him the most. Kwang-soo closed the memo, his expression settling into something calm on the surface, but cold and calculating underneath. He wasn't going to let this stand. Whatever it took, he would make sure Naomi Reed's name never made it to the final submission. She had stepped into a world of greed, and she doesn't know what's coming for her. The design studio became Naomi's second home over the following weeks. Blueprints covered every surface, the long tables, the walls, even the floor when arguments got heated enough that they needed the extra space to spread everything out. "This facade won't work with the environmental system," Naomi said one evening, well past 10, pointing at Min-sok's latest revision. "It works fine on paper. Paper doesn't account for Seoul's humidity patterns in July. You'll get condensation buildup behind these panels within 2 years." Min-sok studied the drawing, then sighed. "You're right. Again. I usually am, because I think through well enough before giving an opinion." He almost smiled at that. Their working relationship developed its own rhythm, arguments over aesthetic choices that stretched late into the night, debates about balancing sustainability with cost. Coffee runs at 2 in the morning when neither of them could sleep, and the ideas kept coming too fast to stop. Min-sok noticed things about her without meaning to. the way Naomi sketched absent-mindedly in the margins of her notebooks whenever she was deep in thought, small doodles of buildings that didn't exist yet, shapes she was working out in her mind before committing them to formal blueprints. Naomi noticed things too. The way Min-seok always removed his watch and set it on the table whenever a deadline pressed too close, like he was trying to physically escape the pressure of time itself. Neither of them mentioned these small observations out loud, but both of them noticed. One night, working past midnight, Naomi brought food from home, her grandmother's recipe for smothered oxtail and cornbread, packed carefully in containers she'd carried across the city on the subway. "You need real food," she said, setting the containers on the only clear corner of the table. "Not whatever's in that vending machine." Min-seok eyed the unfamiliar dish curiously. "What is this?" "Trust me, just try it." He did. His eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "This is incredible. My grandmother's recipe, been in the family for 3 generations." The following week, Min-seok returned the gesture, entering into the office kitchen around 11 at night and returning with a pot of japchae, the noodles glistening with sesame oil. "My mother's recipe," he said, setting it down. "Family tradition." Naomi laughed, genuinely surprised. "You cooked this yourself?" "Yes." They ate together, the tension of the project momentarily forgotten, replaced by something quieter and warmer. Their bond deepened with every late night, every construction site walkthrough, every disagreement that ended not in resentment, but in mutual respect. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was built slowly, brick by brick, the same way they plan building the skyscraper itself. But not everyone watched their growing partnership with admiration. In a quiet corner office 3 floors below, Director Oh Kwang-soo worked late one evening. Alone except for one other person, Ji-yeon, a junior executive who'd spent the past 2 years quietly hoping Min-seok would eventually notice her, the way he now clearly noticed Naomi. "She's not even qualified for this," Kwang-soo muttered, staring at Naomi's latest structural drawings pulled up on his screen. "My nephew has a proper Korean engineering degree, real credentials, and she walks in from some tiny firm and takes everything." "I don't understand what he sees in her," Ji-yeon said quietly, arms crossed. "She doesn't even fit in here." Kwang-soo glanced at her, understanding immediately what she meant, what she wasn't quite saying out loud. He knew she's the perfect partner for the scheme he's plotting. "You have access to the design servers," he said carefully. "Don't you?" Ji-yeon hesitated. "Why?" "Because I think it's time someone put that Miss Reed in her place. We can't just stand by watching." The alteration was small, precise, buried deep within the load-bearing calculations for the building's central support system. Numbers changed just enough to introduce a critical structural flaw that wouldn't be immediately obvious, but would eventually compromise the entire building's stability, which is enough to make them lose bid for the mega contract by submitting such a flawed design. Ji-yeon accessed the restricted design files late one night, her credentials granting her exactly the access Kwang-soo needed, while he made the changes, careful to leave no obvious trace behind. A week passed before anyone noticed. During a routine project inspection, checking all structures to prepare for a demo presentation, one of the structural engineers flagged an inconsistency in the central support calculations that was submitted, numbers that didn't match the load requirements for a building of this height. An error that indirectly renders the whole project useless if submitted. The flaw traced directly back to files under Naomi's name. Word spread through the office fast. "Did you hear? There's a serious problem with the support structure submitted. It's coming from Reed's files. Maybe the small firm's reputation was accurate after all. She isn't fit for a project of this size." Naomi was called into an emergency meeting the following morning, walking into a boardroom full of executives whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly skeptical. "Miss Reed," one senior executive said, sliding a printout across the table. "Can you explain this?" Naomi studied the calculations carefully, her stomach tightening as she recognized the format of her own work, but not the numbers themselves. "These aren't my numbers," she said firmly, looking up. "Someone altered this after I submitted the original file." Skepticism moved around the table. "That's a serious accusation," another executive said. "It's a serious problem," Naomi shot back. "Someone changed my calculations, and now you're all treating me like a criminal, instead of investigating who actually did this." The room didn't fully believe her. Kwang-soo was at the forefront of adding pressure to the issue, influencing others to criticize her. Except for one person, Min-seok stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, watching the exchange with an expression that gave nothing away until he finally spoke. "I've worked closely with Naomi this past week," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "I know her work. I know her precision. Though nobody is above mistake, but these numbers are not hers." Silence fell over the room. "Someone must have tampered with this file," Min-seok continued, "and I intend to find out exactly who." He turned to Naomi. "You'll have full access to every resource you need: IT support, security footage, an independent audit team, whatever it takes." Naomi felt something settle in her chest: relief, gratitude, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name yet. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me," Min-seok said. "Let's just find the truth and watch me handle the rest." They began the investigation together that same afternoon, pulling every construction record, every file access log, every timestamp connected to the altered calculations. The trail led them to the file server room, and then hit a wall. The CTV footage from that room during the exact window when the file was modified, the IT technician reported. "It's gone, erased." Naomi's jaw tightened. Someone covered their tracks. Min-seok's expression darkened. Someone with access high enough to erase security footage without triggering alerts. They sat together late that night, reviewing everything they had, searching for any thread they might have missed. Then Naomi remembered something. "Wait," she said suddenly. "I heard from the chief of security, during a briefing in my first week here, that the Busan branch does maintain a secondary backup server." "How true is that?" Min-seok's eyes lit up. "You're right, it's an older system, mostly forgotten, but it should have mirrored footage from that same time window." They exchanged a knowing look. "If someone erased the primary footage," Naomi said slowly, "they might not even know the backup exists." Min-seok nodded, already forming a plan. "Then let's make sure they hear exactly where we're going next." The following morning, during a company-wide briefing meant to update staff on the investigation's progress, Min-seok made an announcement loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "We've located a secondary backup server at our Busan branch," he said, his voice carrying deliberately across the room. "I'm sending a team there this afternoon to retrieve the footage. Whoever is responsible for this sabotage will be identified right away." The announcement wasn't just information. It was bait. Naomi watched carefully from the back of the room, scanning faces for any flicker of panic, any reaction that didn't match the room's collective relief that answers were finally coming. Most people simply nodded, relieved the mystery might soon be solved. But near the front of the room, Director Oh Kwang-soo's expression shifted for just a fraction of a second, controlled but not controlled enough. Naomi caught it, so did Min-seok, standing close enough beside her to notice the same thing. Neither of them said a word, they simply waited. 20 minutes later, Kwang-soo excused himself from his desk, mumbling something about a family emergency to a nearby colleague, gathering his coat and phone with visibly shaking hands. Min-seok's security team, quietly instructed earlier that morning, began tracking his movement the moment he stepped into the hallway. Naomi's heart pounded as she watched the monitor feed from the security office. Kwang-soo, moving quickly toward the parking garage, phone already pressed to his ear. "He's making a call," the security officer reported, adjusting the audio feed. "We're recording." Kwang-soo's voice came through the speaker, tight with panic. "Listen to me carefully. The backup server in Busan, you need to get there before their team does. Delete everything from that time window. Do you understand? Everything. If they find that footage, we're both finished." Naomi's breath caught. There it was. Undeniable. Recorded. Complete confession. Captured in real time. Min-suk's expression hardened into something cold and absolute as he listened. "Move in," he said quietly into his own radio. "Now." Security caught Kwang-soo before he even reached his car. He tried to bluff his way through it at first, straightening his jacket, forcing calm into his voice. "I don't know what this is about. I told you, I have a family emergency." "We have the call," the security officer said flatly, holding up a phone. "Recorded in full." "You want to try that story again?" Kwang-soo's face drained of color. He was escorted back into the building, past a floor full of employees who'd already started whispering, phones discreetly recording, the moment their senior director was walked through the lobby flanked by security. Now in Min-suk's office, the recorded call played once more, this time for Kwang-soo himself, his own voice echoing back at him with damning clarity. "Delete everything from that time window. If they find that footage, we're both finished." Min-suk switched off the recording and looked directly at him. "Care to explain?" Kwang-soo's composure, carefully maintained for weeks, finally shattered completely. "She doesn't belong here," he said, his voice cracking with years of resentment. "My nephew has real credentials, a proper engineering degree from a Korean university. He's been waiting for an opportunity like this for years, and then she walks in from some tiny firm nobody's ever heard of and takes everything." "So you sabotaged the entire project," Naomi said quietly, standing near the window, "to protect your nephew's ego." "I altered a few numbers," Kwang-soo snapped. "I didn't think it would actually—" "You didn't think a structural flaw in a skyscraper's central support system would matter in our submission." Min-suk's voice went dangerously quiet. "You endangered every penny we will use to fund this initial project. You risk giving this company a bad reputation when we submit this as our entry to land the mega contract. All to punish a woman for being better at her job than your nephew." Kwang-soo had no answer for that. Further investigation that same evening uncovered Ji-yeon's involvement, her access logs showing exactly when she'd entered the restricted design files, exactly when she'd erased the primary security footage from headquarters. When confronted, she didn't bother denying it. "I just don't understand what he sees in her," Ji-yeon said, tears streaming down her face, though whether from guilt or self-pity, no one could quite tell. "I've been here for years. I've done everything right. And she shows up and gets everything. This was never about her taking anything from you, because she never did," Min-suk said, his tone flat with disappointment. "You made a choice to help destroy a project that could have hurt this company's reputation and people's means of livelihood, all because of a senseless excuse." Ji-yeon had nothing left to say. By the following morning, both Kwang-soo and Ji-yeon's employment had been formally terminated. Min-suk pursued full legal action against both of them: corporate sabotage, endangerment, and falsification of delicate engineering records. The charges were serious enough that it would take lots of work for either of them to find work in Korea's competitive corporate world again. The executive board convened one final time to address the entire situation, Naomi standing at the front of the room this time, not as an accused party, but as the vindicated architect whose original calculations were restored and verified as flawless. "I want to formally apologize," the senior executive who'd first accused her said, unable to fully meet her eyes. "We should have trusted your explanation from the start." "You should have," Naomi said simply. "But we got here eventually." The room, once filled with skepticism and hostile glances, now looked at her with open respect. With the alteration fully resolved, Naomi and Min-suk finalized their submission for the $80 billion mega contract, working through the final details together with the same rhythm they'd developed over months. Arguments that ended in better ideas, coffee at strange hours, a partnership built on something far more solid than either of them had expected when this all began. 3 weeks later, the announcement came. They'd won. The multi-dynamic skyscraper, now formally named, its design praised across international architecture publications for its innovative blend of sustainability and cultural authenticity, would be built across Korea, exactly as Naomi and Min-suk had envisioned it together. Naomi's name appeared publicly, alongside Min-suk's on every official document, every press release, every media interview. Not as a consultant, not as a figurehead, as co-lead architect, his equal, his partner. Together, they'd become the face of Asia's newest innovation powerhouse. That evening, they celebrated privately at a luxury restaurant overlooking the Seoul beautiful skyline, the exact skyline their skyscraper would soon transform. The table was filled with food, Korean barbecue, alongside a few southern dishes Naomi had requested specially, wine glasses catching the city lights through the window beside them. "Can you believe this is actually happening?" Naomi asked, leaning back in her chair, exhaustion and joy mixing together after months of relentless work. "I can believe it," Min-suk said, watching her with quiet warmth. "You saved this project the day you walked into that boardroom and told me my design had flaws no one else was brave enough to mention. You could have thrown me out of that meeting. I almost did. For about half a second." He smiled. "Then I realized you were right, and I had to suppress my ego." Naomi laughed, raising her glass toward him. "To boldness, then." "To boldness," he agreed, clinking his glass against hers. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the celebration settling into something quieter, more intimate. "So," Naomi said finally, swirling the wine in her glass, "what's the first thing you want to do now that we've actually won this mega contract everyone coveted?" Min-suk grew quiet, his expression shifting from celebratory to something more serious, more focused entirely on her. "If you're truly single," he said slowly, "like I've observed, and I really hope I'm right about that, then the first thing I want to do is marry you." Naomi nearly choked on her wine, setting the glass down hard enough that it nearly tipped over. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. That came completely out of nowhere. How did you even arrive at that thought? Right now, at dinner?" Min-suk laughed, the sound warm and unguarded in a way she'd rarely heard from him. "You're the one who taught me how to be bold. That's exactly how we met, remember? You stood up in a room full of people too afraid to disagree with me, and you told me the truth anyway." Naomi stared at him, still stunned, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with the wine. "I never do anything halfway," Min-suk continued, reaching for her hand across the table. "Not in architecture, not in business, and apparently, not in love either." "You're insane," Naomi said, though she was smiling now, tears gathering unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes. "Probably," he agreed, "but you're the one who taught me that sometimes the boldest choice is also the right one." Naomi looked at him, this man who'd restructured an entire contract because she'd refused to be a figurehead, who'd defended her publicly in front of a room full of skeptics. Who'd built something extraordinary with her, not out of instant attraction, but out of genuine partnership and respect. "Ask me again," she said softly, "when you actually have a ring." Min-suk's smile widened. "Is that a yes?" "That's a, you better start shopping." They both laughed, the sound carrying warmly across the quiet restaurant, two people who'd achieved a great feat together, starting with nothing but honesty and the courage to speak the truth, even when the whole room disagreed. Naomi raised her glass one final time. To whatever comes next, Min-suk raised his to meet hers. To whatever comes next. Outside the window, Seoul's horizon glittered under the night sky, waiting for the building that would soon rise among its towers, a monument to boldness, state-of-the-art partnership, and two people who found in each other exactly what they never knew they were looking for. And that's the end of Naomi and Min-suk's story, Dynasty of Han Family. From interrupting a $40 million presentation to winning an $80 billion mega contract together, what a journey. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a comment and tell me, what was your favorite moment? When Naomi boldly called out the 3 flaws in that boardroom? When Min-suk restructured the entire contract for her? Or that unexpected marriage proposal over dinner? And listen, If this story touched your heart, I need you to smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. I've got more Afro-Korean romance coming your way. More powerful men who recognize brilliance when they see it. More strong black women who refuse to stay silent, even when the whole room disagrees. Your support keeps this channel alive, family. Every like, every comment, every share are all appreciated. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in love stories built on respect, honesty, and boldness. Until the next story, stay blessed, stay bold, and never be afraid to speak the truth, even when no one else will. Because the right person will always recognize your value, even when the whole room doesn't.